This is Eyewitness News Up Close with Bill Ritter.
But I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I can think of no higher calling than serving as the fire commissioner for the city of New York.
Robert Tucker speaking last week after being sworn in as New York City's 35th fire commissioner. Tucker has never worked as a firefighter, but is a longstanding member of the board of directors for the FDNY Foundation. And get this, when he was a young boy growing up in Manhattan, he was fascinated by fire trucks. So much so that when they went to a fire, young Tucker would follow them to the scene on his bike. Who would have thought? He replaces Laura Kavanaugh, the first woman to hold that job. So what does he have in mind for the new job? We're going to find out. Plus, the race for the White House, taking the Democrats to Chicago for their big convention as presidential nominee Kamala Harris rises in the polls against Donald Trump. So what's the message from Democrats this week? And can they win the pivotal swing votes in the states? This morning, we talked to New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who will be at the convention as a delegate starting tomorrow. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to Up Close. 4 weeks ago today, many Americans, regardless of politics, were wondering how the mess of a political party could quickly rebound from the withdrawal of the race for the presidency by President Biden. 4 weeks ago today, on July 21st, he stepped down. How life changes quickly. The mayor of New York, a Democratic Party delegate who will be in Chicago for the convention that starts tomorrow, he's our first guest. I talked to him. Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you. Welcome to Up Close again.
Thank you. Great to speak with you.
All right. Let's talk about what's going to happen this next week, starting tomorrow. That's Monday, the Democratic Party convention in Chicago. What's your expectations of it? What are you looking for? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I am extremely excited. This is the second time I am a delegate. The first time was under President Barack Obama, and now to be able to do this under who I believe is going to be the next president of the United States, VP Harris. And there's so much I believe we as Democrats must discuss, but at the top of the agenda is affordability and safety. That is really the prerequisite to be able to enjoy our cities across America. And I'm going to meet with some immigration leaders to talk about what we have done here in New York and how we could duplicate across the entire country.
I do want to talk about what you've done in New York and the migrants who have come here and what's happening this last week in New York, as soon as we get over the political parts of all this. You said earlier this week somewhere that you never thought you'd see a black president, and now here you are working to have the second black president.
And it's just a real testament of how this country is a country of opportunities. I say it over and over again. There's no place where dream is attached to its name. There's not a German dream, a French dream, a Polish dream, but there's an American dream. And when you could have Barack Obama, whose dad was from Kenya, still rise to be the leader of this free country, and then you could have VP Harris with the Indian origin as well as Caribbean and African American woman, is able to be now on the cusp of being the President of the United States. That says a lot about not only those individuals, but it says a lot about our country.
But the way this is going so far, there's just so much vitriol and anger. And I'm not going to say from whom or anybody else, but it seems like that so much of that is vitriol, this election. And so little, or not nearly as much as it should be talked about, the real issues here.
No, so true. And it was interesting. A reporter stopped me the other day and said, why aren't you hurling negative comments about Donald Trump? And I've stated several months ago, I had to do some deep reflection. And we are contributing to just this nasty atmosphere as we try to not only fight for our city, but fight for our country. And I think we should tone it down and focus on the issues. The issues of making sure we're going to create a country where every child has the opportunity to succeed. And I think if we stick to those talking points and show why we have a good product, America is going to appreciate that.
I think a lot of people are just sort of tired about saying, you know, well, someone's stupid. Well, that's not the issue here. The issue is who's going to be best for the country, what are the issues, and what are the key politics that are going to be important to people's lives every day. The money they make or don't make, the housing that they don't or do have, the housing they can't afford or can't afford. All those questions. You know, you run in the biggest city in the country. So all of that is what people want to hear about.
So true, and I could not have stated it better. Hurling insults at each other, I think, is a way of covering up one's ability to lay out a clear plan. We must be extremely disciplined, and the level of clarity that's needed. What is the plan of moving our country forward as we deal with some real challenges? You know, we're dealing with economic challenges, we're dealing with public safety challenges. Guns are proliferating in our cities, and you're seeing similar violence across the entire country. And we're dealing with the affordability issues. Americans are concerned about the affordability, and we need to show how we're going to place the country on the pathway of economic recovery and stability. I think the president has done a great job with VP Harris, and now it's time to show how we're going to extend that.
Let me take a look at what we were at 4 weeks ago on this Sunday. 4 weeks ago, the president said, I'm not going to run for re-election, I'm getting out. And then he backed his Vice President Harris to run for office. You at the time said, and then a lot of people backed you, said, hey, we should wait to go to the convention, let's make this work. And we've seen what's happened to your party in the last month. It has been something extraordinary. And to Vice President Harris, how she has really sort of, you know, come to the fore about all this, because I don't think she had that kind of energy publicly during the last 3.5 years. Why did you change your mind? And what were you thinking of? What were you going for when you first came up with that, saying, hey, we got to wait to the convention?
Following my party and the direction they wanted to go, I communicated with Jay Jacobs, who was the county leader here in New York State, and he stated that we want to show a unified force after all the uncertainty that we experienced. And I stated, listen, I'm a soldier, and I believe when you are with the right group, stand with that group as we move forward. And I did not want anyone to believe there was a level of dissension. I was supported in 2020, and I believe that her background and what she brings to the table, VP Harris, clearly is the authentic leader that we need. Now think about for a moment, she worked in McDonald's, for God's sake. Yeah. I mean, how do you get more authentic than that when you see a person who has gone through a lot, former prosecutor, when you've gone through a lot, you need to help people who are going through a lot, and instead of going through all of that, she's now going to lead us out of it.
Let's talk about grit and turn it to New York City. Let's start first with crime. What's happened in Central Park this last week? The police department moved pretty quickly on this, but they were young migrants who were doing these rip-offs of people, and the rip-offs were up by triple the amount they were a year ago. There were other problems as well. What happened on Randall's Island? I want to get your opinion, and before I do, one of your chiefs told one of our reporters this week, it's impossible to know how much crime would be down if the city, if it weren't for crimes being committed by people living in migrant shelters and others who have come here in this wave. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a real analysis. When you look at some of the crimes and some of the individuals involved, as I stated, I sent the Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence and the First Deputy Commissioner, Tanya Casella, down to Colombia to look at this dangerous gang that has made its way into our country. And we're concerned about that, and we have to respond to it no matter what the challenges are. We have the finest police department on the globe, and we have to be able to pivot and shift based on the threats that we meet. Yep. And so there is a small number of migrant and asylum seekers that are participating in illegal behavior. The overwhelming number, Bill, I cannot say it enough, when I go to the humanitarian relief centers, they want to work, they want to contribute to the American dream, and we need to be sure to go after those who are dangerous and allow those who want to work to participate.
Keeping on the New York theme here, I wanted to just ask you about what happened, what was reported in the New York Times on Thursday, that you and your staff, campaign staff, have received subpoenas in their federal investigation. Can you talk about it? What did you get subpoenaed for, and what's the status of the investigation?
You know, like previous administrations that had to go through subpoenas, you participate, you cooperate. I made it clear, former law enforcement officer, I've stated over and over again, I hold myself beyond a reproach, and when you receive a subpoena, you respond. We're going to cooperate fully with all the reviews that are taking place, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to show that there's no criminality here, and our team is going to take whatever information the federal government is looking for. We're going to turn it over to them in an appropriate fashion. I've said that from the beginning, and we're continuing to carry out that process.
With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, the subpoenas were issued in July, and no one found out about it until the Times broke the story, here the first 2 weeks of August.
Tell me about that question that you're asking, because I'm not getting it.
Well, the question is, you didn't make it public when that happened, that you had gotten subpoenaed. It happened in July. We're just finding out about it, middle of August.
Well, this is a few days later. You're talking about it happening, I think it was late July, now we're in the middle of August. The goal is to cooperate and participate with every review takes place, and we want to make sure we do that. We get a countless number of foils, thousands of foils we get from all over the city.
Yeah.
We don't broadcast each one we get, and that's the same thing when you get a subpoena. You respond to it appropriately and accordingly, and that is exactly what we're doing.
I want to end this on another note, because no one will ever doubt that you don't have any great optimism about this city. I think that oozes out of you at every place. But do you have fears? Do you have doubts about how New York City is recovering, especially after the pandemic that we had? Are we where we should be? Are we where you thought we would be when you became mayor?
Well, I think that you can answer that better, and I think that Fitch and the other economic experts that raise our bond rating, when we have more private sector jobs in the history of the city, more small businesses operating in the city in the history of the city. We finance more affordable housing in 1 year in the history of the city. We move more people from homelessness into permanent housing in 1 year in the history of the city. Crime, I inherit 40% increase in crime. We're down double digits in shootings and homicides. 17,900 guns off our streets. We have a 30% decrease in unemployment among Black and Hispanics. You look across the board, we're leading the state in reading and math. You'll see this city is thriving, 63 million tourists. So we're exactly where I believe we were supposed to be, and I know we're going to move us further, even with 212,000 migrants and asylum seekers. You don't see this city looking like other cities with encampments lining our highways and our roads. You're seeing good governance, and I think when people look back on this administration, they're going to see that this is one of the greatest economic turnarounds in the history of the city of New York.
And very quickly, just before we say goodbye, you're planning to run for re-election, I take it?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
But the focus is right now, I think every Democrat should be focused on one thing, and that is ensuring VP Harris is the next president of the United States. Everything else can come after that. My election is after November, not before November.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the interview today, and good luck at the convention this next week.
Thank you.
Now to the big change in the New York City Fire Department. A new commissioner appointed by Mayor Adams, his second FDNY commissioner in more than 2.5 years of his administration. Robert Tucker, sworn in earlier this week as the 35th commissioner of the country's biggest fire department. And he joins us for his first interview with us on Up Close this morning. Congratulations, Commissioner.
Thanks for having me, Bill. I'm honored.
Robert or Bob?
Robert.
Okay, Robert.
Yeah.
Okay. Or commissioner is probably a good way to do it,
Robert's
too, right?
fine.
Did you want to be a commissioner of the FDNY all your life?
It's been a lifetime dream. I mean,
Really?
I have been a unapologetic fire buff since I was a little boy. In fact, my first summer internship at age 15 was working for the FDNY.
And what did they have you doing as an intern?
I was assigned to the communications division in the Manhattan Communications Office, which at the time was located right here in Central Park.
And you did what for that summer?
I filed
coffee for people.
I got
Yes.
coffee. I filed after-action reports. I listened to how the dispatchers were doing an incredible job getting fire trucks to emergencies, and I pin mapped multiple alarm fires before there were computers doing this, to see the clumps of where fifth alarm fires were, fourth alarm fires were, third alarm fires were, and I hypothesized that at the ripe old age of 15, that multiple alarm fires, bigger fires, were happening further away from firehouses.
And that meant what to a 15-year-old?
Look, it was an analog solution
Yeah.
to a problem that's been improved upon rather drastically.
You know right away where something is and
Yeah.
how long it's going to take to get there.
Exactly.
I read somewhere where when you were a little kid growing up here in Manhattan, that that you would get on your bike when you heard a fire truck,
Yeah.
and you'd follow it to the fire.
This is true, and I'm not ashamed to tell you that I lived a few blocks away from a firehouse, and it was fun for me to race up and down Lexington Avenue and 3rd Avenue, chasing Engine 22 and Ladder 13, until I got a scanner at Radio Shack. And I didn't have to chase them because I knew where they were going.
What a great story. What a great story. Did you ever think you'd be fire commissioner?
I dreamt about it. I went on to become an assistant district attorney in Queens County and start a business, but I always wanted to be fire commissioner, and I'm so grateful to Mayor Adams and his team for appointing me.
You were on the FDNY Foundation board.
I was.
You're not anymore.
Well, I'm not, and I am now.
Right,
Yeah.
because you're the commissioner, so you're automatically on it.
Exactly.
But you're not a board member anymore because you can't do that.
No.
Right?
So I'm no longer on lots of the boards that I have served on with pride.
Did you pitch the job, or did they approach you?
You know, I was a part of the mayor's public safety transition team, and worked closely with his top team of advisors, and I wanted the job, and the mayor appointed former Fire Commissioner Laura Kavanaugh, to whom I'm very grateful for her 10 years of service to the FDNY. And I think the mayor knew that I always wanted this job, and I still remained interested when she left.
Your top agenda items, what are you looking to do?
Look, I mean, obviously there are lots of things to build on in this wonderful department. It's the greatest department in the world, and the EMTs and paramedics and firefighters that work there are the most unbelievable heroes you could imagine. I've spent the last week meeting lots of them. I plan to be with them a lot and listen to them. Lithium-ion battery fires are a very important agenda item for us. Fentanyl and getting to the scene of overdoses quickly. Response times here in New York is a major issue that we need to figure out how to do better. So there are a lot of top priorities, but my number one priority is keeping the members of the department safe and the people of the city of New York.
And that's the main attraction. There's no question about it. That is what has to happen, and it has been happening. Your predecessor, I think we should say something about Laura Kavanaugh. Never has a commissioner ever done something like what she did with lithium batteries. Gone to Washington, helped get a bill passed. Hopefully the Senate will pass it. What happened in the city council, making these things outlawed. This was, that's quite a legacy already.
Absolutely. I mean, she did really terrific work around the lithium-ion batteries.
18 fire deaths from that last year. I think there's just one this year. Right?
I mean, it's the department has been unbelievable in responding to it. I thank former Commissioner Kavanaugh for that. I thank our Bureau of Fire Investigations for it. I thank our operations division in the fire department for learning more and more every day about how to put out lithium-ion battery fires. So I think she's left us a very solid foundation on which to build.
Is there backlog here from what happened with Ms. Kavanaugh? Was there problems with that? Yeah, a lot of the old guard that had left, the old guard that stayed, had high praise for her. What's your take on all that?
Look, I thank her for her service to the department and to our great city.
You're not an old guard.
No.
You're a young guy.
That's nice of you to say. I've been involved with the department for a long time, and there's just so much to do there, and I'm excited to get my arms around it.
You know, a lot of people say, well, you know, here is another guy who not a firefighter who became a commissioner. But the truth is, if my numbers are right, 2 out of 3 of the commissioners in the history of the great FDNY were not firefighters.
Yeah.
You're not, although you were, as a kid, you wanted to be a firefighter.
No, look,
but you weren't
I
a
think
firefighter.
every kid wants to be a firefighter or a police officer. I've known lots of the commissioners through my work with the foundation, and both those like Dan Nigro and Sal Casano and Tom Von Essen, who were firefighters, and also Howard Safer and Nick Scapetta, who weren't. Laura Kavanaugh, obviously. I think everyone brings something special to the department, and I plan to do so.
Well, everyone depends on you. And everyone depends on all those firefighters, the 17,000 who work for the biggest fire department in the country. We wish you nothing but good luck. I should say, full thing, you know, you've got quite a business resume. You own a big security firm. You have stepped down from that. But you're the boss of a lot of our security agents here at ABC, who would do a great job.
Thank you for that. I was their boss. I am now no longer their boss. I am working full-time for the City of New York and the FDNY.
And your grandfather, before we go, was a great artist.
He was the leading tenor at the Metropolitan Opera right across the street for forever until his untimely death in 1975.
And you sat on his board of directors
I did.
For his foundation as well.
I did, yeah.
So you're a New Yorker from way back when. Commissioner, great to have you here. We are great partners with the FDNY and our Operation 7 Save a Life, and we look forward to working with you.
And thank you for that work. We are deeply in your debt for the hard work that you've done.
And we are honored by your participation.
Thank you. Thank you so
Commissioner
much, Bill. Appreciate it.
Robert, thank you very much.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Good.
Good luck to you. When we come back, our political consultant, Hank Scheinkoff, on the Democratic Convention and the presidential race and what happens this week in Chicago. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Up Close. As we've been saying, tomorrow the Democratic Convention opens in Chicago. We have talked about how life changes so quickly, and who knows that better than most? Political consultant Hank Scheinkoff. Henry, good to see you, and thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you, Bill. Great to see you.
You think about this, 4 weeks ago, President Biden withdrew his name from consideration for running for president, and now the Democratic Convention starts. There are those who said, hey, we want to go through the old-fashioned route here and, not just have someone get it like the vice president did. But the party seems pretty together right now.
Well, the party doesn't want chaos. If the party has chaos, the Republicans will win. They'll take the House and take the Senate. That's the reason why Biden was removed in the first place. So they don't want to have a repeat. The problem now is, can they manage Chicago and the convention without a repeat of, frankly, 1968?
Why are you bringing that up? I mean, why would it be like 1968? Because there's not going to be that kind of division that there was back in Mayor Daley's day, and the police were, it was a police riot to the demonstrators there over the protests over the Vietnam War. This is not that case.
No question that there was a police riot. We look at the clips, we see police officers using nightsticks before they had discussions. That's true. But what we saw the other night, this past week in New York, where there was a rally for the Harris-Walz ticket, what happened? Well, the demonstrators took over the streets, assaulted police officers. They're not interested in the Democratic Party. What they're interested in is creating disruption. And if they do that in the street, no one will know whom to blame except the Democrats.
And so demonstrations there in Chicago starting tomorrow night, you don't think that's going to be unusual? You think that it might happen?
Listen, we've seen the radical elements trying to upset the Democratic Party. They now have an opportunity. It's up to the Chicago police and whomever the mayor of the city of Chicago invites to help him police the outside of the convention to do the right thing. It's also up to people inside that hall not to create chaos. All
right, well, let's talk about inside that hall. What are the things besides, dealing with the demonstrators? What are the things that the Democratic Party needs to do inside that arena?
Well, reporters the day after the first day of the convention will be writing about comparisons to the Republican convention, which ran without a problem. There were no glitches. The only issue was, of course, Donald Trump's extended speech, which was unintended or unexpected. If the convention the Democrats run on the inside of the convention hall functions as well as the Republicans, there'll be very little to write about. But if there is chaos, that will be the story and the lead of the next day's papers and TV coverage.
Hank Shankoff, always a pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
All right, take care. And we'll be right back. And that's going to do it for this edition of Up Close. We thank you for watching. Tiempo with Joe Torres is next. And if you missed any of today's programs, not to worry. I'm going to post the segments on my Facebook page. That'll be tomorrow. And you can hear the show on our podcast on any of our ABC7 NY platforms. I'm Bill Ritter, and for all of us here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News, we wish you health and peace. And let's take care of each other.